Oh wow, the numbers are growing, so I should probably get going and get started. All right.
Yay!
Yeah. Did Charlie make it?
Not yet.
We're trying to get Charlie over here. All right. Welcome everyone. That was the opening for Nina Simone's song Sinner Man. And my name is Sade, and I'm with my friends and colleagues, Lucurisa. Charlie will be here in a minute. He's navigating the internet. Rodney and Dimitri. And we are happy that you can spend some time with us discussing art and music on a Tuesday. We will spend around an hour and 15 minutes looking at amazing artwork and enjoying the musical pairings we have chosen for today. As usual, we invite you to participate in our discussion via chat. And if you are on Facebook, we will jump in and out of Zoom to check on you. So comment away. Also, if you want to just hop on to Zoom, you can go to our website and sign up for this particular program, and then you can join us on Zoom. But you're perfectly fine on Facebook as well. So today, I'm so happy that we have this program today because I'm a big fan of Nina Simone, as many of you are. And hi, Pamela, good to see you. Hey, Pam. And today we'll be presenting music and art inspired by Nina Simone's music. And I want to start with what she wrote in her autobiography. And she writes that her function as an artist is to make people feel on a deep level. It is difficult to describe because it's not something you can analyze. To get near what it's about, you have to play it. And when you've caught it, when you've got the audience hooked, you always know because it's like electricity hanging in the air. So I love that, and I hope we are able to at least connect to that spirit, that electricity today in some way or another. And as promised, we're bringing you pairings of art and music of the legendary artist and activist. We can say so much about Nina Simone, and we will celebrate her legacy through visual art, and we will discuss colors, layers, rhythms, and complexities found both in the artwork and the artwork that we're looking at, the artworks we will see and discuss, and in the songs we have selected. But before we start, as usual, everyone, and here we go. I think our first pairing. So what we'll do is look at the artwork for about 15, 16 seconds, pair it and play some music to pair with it, and then we'll have an up close look at it as we discuss the artwork and the music. So about 16 seconds, we'll look at the artwork. Fantastic. Great. That was a little bit longer because I was checking on Charlie if he's here. Charlie, you here? He's on his way. Okay, we'll just do the music.
Take me to the water. Take me to the water. Take me to the water to be baptized.
All right, so while Charlie and Dimitri will talk about the art, I do want to say for this that what inspired this pairing is dimension of water, the person that is the subject that is lifting her hand, kind of having a heavenly connection, and talking about baptism. And in this cover that Nina Simone has, she is covering a gospel song, an old spiritual song, much like Go Down Moses and Deep River. Take Me to the Water connects that spirituality that was brought from Africa, also to connecting that to the water baptism of Christianity, and also to kind of connect it to how Nina Simone, her spiritual background or her religious background. And she was born at Eunice Kathleen Wayman in Tryon, North Carolina, and she's a prestigious talent as a musician. I mean, you could tell early on that she had this talent. She could play music just by the ear, and she started playing piano by ear at the age of 3. And her mother, a Methodist minister, and her father was a handyman and a preacher himself. They couldn't really ignore that, so they encouraged this talent in the church. And even later on, as Nina Simone grew up in the church and practiced her music in the church, but not singing. She did not sing at all. She did not use her voice. She used just the instrument. So later on, when Nina Simone started to play in clubs and music venues, her mother had called it working in the fires of hell. And that's how religious her mother was. And overnight, Eunice Wayman became Nina Simone by taking the nickname Nina, meaning little one in Spanish, which her ex-boyfriend gave her, and Simone after the actress Simone Signoret. And so it's this art was appropriate to open with, I thought. What do you say about the artwork?
Can I just jump in and you played the song "Take Me to the Water," and it just seems very fitting because Sherry in chat has told us that years ago she was at a resort with her family, and they shared a private pool with Nina Simone, and they got to meet her. She said she was a lovely person.
Oh, wow.
So take me to the water.
Amazing. It connects to you. Yeah.
Wow. Right. And Dimitri points out that she really changed her name so that her parents wouldn't find out about her playing. So that's also a fun little.
Yeah.
I like that. Thanks, Dimitri. Yeah. Lucretia, you want to start us off?
Okay, sure. So, when I first saw this piece, my first impression is this is a spiritual woman who is in her prayer closet, and she is praying and worshiping God in spite of problems and worries. And, the reason why I say that is when, you get the close up of her face, you can see that not only is she, worshiping God, but there's also this kind of look of worry, that's in her face. She has the kind of slightly frowned, downward gaze. And so I just kind of felt that she's in her prayer closet and she's worshiping, but she's also, petitioning God to take care of some issues. It's just an amazing, amazing work. There's such a command of the medium. There's the shading and the light. And I especially like how it's almost like it's backlit. There's that I guess it's negative space that's in the background, and it kind of calls forth that feeling of a sacred moment for me. And then, the folds in the dress as they're kind of laying there, it's marvelous. I was so taken and drawn by this picture. And then when I was reading some information on Charles Wright, I found out that he was really committed to creating really powerful images of African Americans, what he described as his images of dignity. And he was unwavering in this commitment over the course of his career. He believed that art has a role to play in changing the world. It has to be an integral part of the struggle. It can't simply mirror what's taking place, but it has to adapt itself to human needs. It has to ally itself with forces of liberation. And so he actually said that he had no use for artists who try to divorce themselves from the struggle. So he created these bold and large scale paintings that kind of magnified the power of the Black figure. And so just, looking at this, we can see this, with no shadow of a doubt whatsoever, because this is a very powerful rendition of this person in a very sacred and private time.
And I think your use of the word dignity is really the operative word here. When you look at her face, there is nothing light about this work at all. And for me, with her arms outstretched like that, I feel like she has the weight of her beliefs in her hands as well, that there is this connection with that. Such an interesting guy too. When he was young, his mom couldn't afford to have a daycare person for him. So basically she'd leave him off at the library and he would, just got into all these art books. But he was also a little bit of a troublesome kid because he was so good at his art and he got a couple of scholarships, but basically they threw him out because he just didn't want to toe the line, And eventually what happened is the Art Institute of Chicago ended up offering him a scholarship, which he then accepted. And, again, I have to give out another shout out to the Art Institute of Chicago, who was so instrumental in guiding so many Black artists. We've covered some of them already. But, if you think about it, there weren't, it's a fabulous institution in terms of a teaching institution. It's one of the best in the United States. And yet you don't hear Black artists coming from some of these other top-notch institutions. Chicago, they did. And so, it's really great. And of course, he was just a drafts person, just to beat all. He just had amazing chops. You look at the way he's done the light on her forehead, and it's just masterful. And then, of course, the way the eyes are kind of slanted down or even closed. It's a very, very powerful piece. And I'm glad that we were able to talk about this one.
Awesome. Thank you both. All right. And that 16-second of looking at art, and then we'll discuss the art and music in just a second. Yeah, why did you all think of this pairing? My thought was, this, first of all, this song, I think it's going to rain today, just reminded me of the materials used in this art and it being outside, and it kind of reminded me of the windmill, a rain gauge kind of situation. And then when listening to this song, it kind of matched for me, and learned a little bit later that it was originally written by Randy Newman. But one of the things that we notice with Nina Simone is it really depends on when you hear it, who hears the song. who hears the song, when you hear it, and she has the ability to transform a song to just hit us right there where we need it. And I think this song, if I had heard it any other way, I don't think I would have been moved by it as much as I am moved by it, sang by Nina Simone. And I think it's because historical things connect, cultural things connect when it comes out of her. I feel a little bit understood, but also coming back to this art piece, I think it's going to rain today and talking about humanity as it takes shape in a form of a human, but I won't talk too much about the art piece. Yeah, take it away, please. Yeah.
Rodney, with it in your background, you want to start us off?
Well, yeah, I was really intrigued to learn about Joe Minter and his kind of life's work creation in his hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, which is called it's called African Village in America, and it's kind of like these multiple scenes evoking all kinds of events in Black American history, including the terrible church bombing, 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham, and the bringing of slaves from Africa, and kind of commemorating those people that, you know, were brought over. And just like, I've seen the pictures of his property, and it just makes me really, I'm wondering if anyone in the audience has gotten a chance to see this, because it looks really extraordinary. And so this figure, which is kind of a standalone, I just really, you know, I really love the way it suggests all kinds of different scenes. To me, it makes me think of Don Quixote and maybe some of the famous sculptures of that, you know. Also like the fact that he's using all these found objects. You know, that I think that's really like the it's like trowels, and maybe that's a bicycle wheel. Really, really interesting. But Dimitri, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Sadeh, do you mind doing the zoom out? Because there's just
sure.
like this interesting figuration that he's doing. So when I look at this piece, sometimes I see a face. I don't know if you can see where the two hose are the eyes, and then there's a little piece that looks like a nose and a very long mustache within it. Other times I see a full figure with outstretched arms holding the dream catchers. And so I don't know, I think it's really interesting that you can read it both ways. Yes, Sherry, there are actually intentionally dream catchers. There's one in the very top, and then there's one in the left side within those wheel type figures that he's actually woven out of yarn on there. And he also says of the piece, you know, the dream catcher represents the thoughts of a human being, thoughts from a faraway time, thoughts of the ancestors. Then he goes on to say our cultural ties are to the ancestral place. Those ties cannot be broken, the ties to our own roots, to our family tree. Martin Luther King was our voice in the wilderness. He was chosen, he called to be our cry. And, you know, he made this piece in 2000, somewhere around 2005. It was part of his African Village, but also a standalone piece at the same time. And, you know, besides the tools of production, of working the land, or in some kind of way, if you look on the right side, there is a gun. And so I start, you know, when he's mentioning Dr. Martin Luther King, like every other piece, every other tool that's in here is to repair. You know, you even have the lug nut wrench in the very top. You have the garden, what do you call the metal garden fence post. You know, for the temporary one, that's kind of like the staff that the figure is holding. If you look at the whole thing as a single figure, everything is constructive except for the gun. And so you can't help but think that he's making this connection to, you know, this hard work, this labor, this progress, this building and catching of a dream. And then you've got this one element of destruction that's just dangling there. And not only dangling there, but attached to a chain. So I won't go into my deep interpretations of this. I will let everyone.
Go ahead, Dimitri.
No. It's good, because I think I think some things are best to let folks make their own connections to it. But yes, definitely what Carol says. First, I saw a figure similar to the previous charcoal figure connecting spirituality, but now seeing the face and elements connected to it. Yeah, it's this interesting piece that kind of has this really back and forth to me.
And this is on display now at the Smithsonian in DC. It kind of seems like it might be, according to the text that we were given, because this would be a great thing to go and see in person, I think. And I know Joe Minter has been represented at the De Young and other museums.
And he's still alive. He's still very much alive, which is awesome.
And I think, and we're going to see this in some other artists we talked about today, someone who did a lot of his work later in life, just kind of after a life of hard work in something else, this is like his life's work.
Wow.
He was born Sherry asked when he was born. He was born in 1943.
All right, Rodney.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much, both of you, for such. Oh, that was powerful. I also so just that. Moving on to the next piece. So I'm noticing that when we look at it in the full version, so let me know if you want to look at it in the full version, and then we can zoom in also. So whichever one works for you. Okay, there we go. Okay.
And then sometimes again it seems that all I have is worry. And then you're bound to see my other side. But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
So this song, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, I think, immediately I looked at the title of this piece and then connected that. And then as I'm listening to the music, I started to also see the faces, the other sides, the snake, and I started seeing few faces that I had not seen in the first place. And one of the things that I think, as we talk about the art piece a little bit longer, we start to connect the music with this piece. And just to give a background on this song is Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood was written for Nina Simone by composer Horace Ott. And the lyrics were then finished off by Benin Benjamin and Sol Marcus. And initially it was written for the songwriter's, I think, partner or soon to be wife or something like that, who there was a fallout. So this song the singer is trying to explain to the lover, although they are trying to change, they sometimes go bad. So they ask their lover to understand their good intentions. So that's and I started to kind of to think about the snake and the woman in this one having some sort of, some relationship that they're trying to figure out. Am I afraid of you? But I'll let you talk about the art.
Yeah, I first of all, I have to read the whole title because this is
Charlie.
The best title that we have today. Yeah. So the title is, If the Ladies Had Knew the Snakes Wouldn't Bite Them, They Wouldn't Have Hurt the Snakes. If the snakes had knew the ladies wouldn't hurt them, they wouldn't have bit the ladies. So I just love this combination of these two conditional sentences, and it's just such a great tension that comes from that. And I think, as someone mentioned in the notes, it really is how people sometimes react to, if then, there really is this lack of understanding. And in this particular case, when you first see this, you see, well, at least when I first saw this piece, I saw all these faces with what looked like braided hair. And of course, the more you look at it, you realize that the braided hair is a snaky snake or several snaky snakes, and it's such a really interesting idea. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Thornton Dial. We've talked about some of his work in the past, and he often uses tigers in his imagery. And if you look at the background, you can almost imagine the coloration of a tiger, but there's not really tigers here, because when he talks about that, he says, people look at my work and they think about tigers. What I'm really about is women and honoring women. And so I wanted to just give you this one quote that he says: "Women are the creation of the world. They give love and care, and they also give strength and power. But you got to listen. I always paid attention to what the women was saying ever since I were a little fella." So I think that's really the central core of a lot of his work, is his homage to women in this. Who's my partner in talking about this one? Today's
I'm with you. I'm with you.
I jumped in early because I had to read that title.
No. I love it. I think for me, when I'm born and raised in California, we have some snakes. We don't have a lot of snakes here compared to, places in the South, particularly where Thornton Dial is coming from in Alabama, where there's all manner of snakes, poisonous and non. And so for me, the first thing that I started looking at was the snakes. And, just immediately, in school, you hear about corn snakes versus king snakes. I still have never seen one in my life. So, it's never something I've had to worry about. But, I immediately started thinking of, the rhyme, red and yellow, kill a fellow, red and black, friend of Jack. And, that's how you can tell them, even though the king snake or what's the other one? There's like three different ones. The coral snakes also. There's coral, corn, and king snakes. And I guess the difference is if the red is right next to either yellow or white, because some of them have white, some of them have yellow, and he's got the white. And here, then they're poisonous. And it looks like he puts a little bit of black banding between them. So it's really hard to tell. He also is kind of playing with it because the bands are straight in nature, but he's kind of got these chevron things going on. And so, for me, it's just like, are these poisonous snakes? He also adds these rattlesnake tails on the end. So I'm assuming if I came across a snake like this, that it is poisonous and I would stay very, very far away. But it's interesting that the women are wrapped in those snakes. And so looking at them, you don't know if they're friend or foe. And then also the additional title is that, this is a jungle. So he calls this the African jungle picture. So, I just think it's just this really interesting thing and perfectly ties into the Nina Simone song that Sade picked, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood.
And Donna makes a great comment. She says, and it begs the question, can we go back and repair mistakes? Will initial perceptions really ever be changed or changeable? And I think that's a really nice comment. And then there's someone else had a nice comment. Rodney, did you see?
I think that was P.I. Fong that had a really great comment. He said, they said, it goes back to the Garden of Eden, Eve blamed for problems of men.
That's true. That's true. And then why we all think snakes represent, evil automatically. Though some snakes are really cute. And then someone else, Corey.
And then,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say, just Corey says the snakes remind them of Medusa and her story as well. So kind of that curse of the snake. The snakes on the head.
Yeah. Someone else said it reminded them of a Egyptian, of Egyptian head.
Yeah, Sherry said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Corey went on to say, and how Medusa is misunderstood as a mythological character.
That's so true.
Yeah, I think also just before we move on, just if you're in the Bay Area, then you probably saw or LA, or wherever it traveled to the Soul of a Nation exhibition where there was a Thornton Dial pieces. And so if you haven't seen these, they're enormous. They're gigantic paintings, and we're looking at it on this little screen. And he uses, he had a background in labor and in construction, working for the Pullman Company before he retires to go and to, dedicate himself full time to being an artist in 1981. And so he takes a lot of his training. So what we're looking at is not just simply a painting. He's using enamel, so what you would use to paint steel for cars, industrial steeling compound wire backed onto wood. So if you were to see the piece and actual stand in front of it, it's very three-dimensional and heavily, worked up surface.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but this is not a painting I would put up in my bedroom. Every time I looked at it, it's like, ooh.
Oh, man. Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next piece? I know we love this one. I did not think that we were going to talk about this piece as long as we have, which is great. And the comments are going. So if we want to read them, we can definitely do that. Ebony says, "I really do love the story that is telling. Totally not a bedroom painting." Somebody else agrees with you, Charlie. Yeah. And Cherry says, "I went to Soul of a Nation twice because I loved it so much in the first time. The fact that my son and I left the De Young at closing time on Friday. I'm so glad you got to see it. That's really great." Okay. Awesome. Okay, let's see here. I think folks are really going to enjoy this piece. Hopefully as much as I have. All right. So this song, I wish we could play the whole song. I found it kind of powerful because, in this song, it's almost kind of, she talks about this beautiful land where all your dreams come true, and it's all tied up in a rainbow, all shiny and new, but it's not easy to find no matter what you do. And she even has, she says, from China to Peru, you can't find this land. And then she talks about finding it within, inside your heart, for the beautiful land is in your heart. And I think in a way, it reminds me of the ideas of Afrofuturists, kind of creating this space where you've searched the world, where it doesn't feel as home or youth-centered, African or Black-centered, but then you create this reality where Blackness is centered, and it just, to me, it really reminds me of that. It's just like in my own mind space, searching for all places in the world, and thinking, wow, there must be another place, there must be another space. So that's this song kind of connected, also visually talking about the blues and the rainbows and all of those kind of things. So I will invite you to take it away.
Well, I like what Carol says. She validates your choice of the song. She says she loves the playfulness of the song, or the delivery, which made me see a figure dancing where I originally saw a place. And so I think that is an interesting question with this painting. Is it a landscape? Is it maybe suggesting figures in movement? And you can really interpret it both ways. I know the artist, he's South African, and I believe he was inspired to kind of capture the music of where he comes from with this. So, it's kind of interesting to see this as an evocation of sound. What are your thoughts, Charlie?
Oh, I love this piece. He was very inspired by a Miriam Makeba piece called Chilo Chilo, which talks about a bird. And so that's sort of what he had in mind. But, I saw this piece and I was trying to place like what it really reminded me of. And when he was in South Africa, he won a sort of up and coming artists award, which allowed him to travel through Europe. And he got to see a lot of Paul Klee's work and was really influenced by him. And if you know Paul Klee's work, it's kind of like, yeah, wow, now I see that. And that's exactly, I love Paul Klee's work because it is playful. And, Sherry says, it's really colorful. They're comforting colors. Carol says there's like an Afrofuturist take as well. I think you can look at this as a figurative piece. There is a person, there is a head, there's a body, looks like it's almost running or skipping, or you could completely take it into an abstract direction, and he was totally comfortable with both of those. One thing I did read about him is unfortunately both he and his wife died of COVID, so which is too bad. Oh, I see Carol was agreeing with Sade, and Penelope says it reminds her of a dancing rhino. Yeah, I think with this kind of work, there's just so many different images that you could come up with because there are so many layers to it and so many different types of patterns to it. So it really allows your brain to free associate. And I think that's why I was really attracted to this particular piece.
But maybe whatever we interpret it as, we might agree on the mood of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, to me, it's a very uplifting kind of positive mood. But I'm just wondering, others, what do you guys see when you look at it? So tell us in chat.
Yeah, Nazima says it looks fluid. See, now this is a piece I would put in my bedroom.
Sure.
This has such a light, airy mood to it, and I do like the complexity of it. I always like a work when it allows itself to be interpreted in many, many different ways because of the composition or the complexity or the different materials. And here he really is using so many materials. And I was not familiar with his work at all before Sade found this piece. So I was really happy that we got a chance to talk about it.
Sherry wants to know, what do we make of the square in the center?
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Sade. Go ahead.
I think, it depends on who looks at it. And I think for me, immediately when I saw it, I saw indigo. I saw indigo, and I saw it being the center of this piece, and my eyes directly leading up to very complementary colors up on top to the kind of rainbowish sun, the orangish sun. And it was just the connection with it. It just even deepening the blueness of the indigo, and that's what I think that indigo being a powerful color in many parts of Africa, it just made me think of it pretty quickly. But I think it depends on your own view on this one too, because I don't have the explanation from the explanation text from it. One thing I wanted to say though, also because the playfulness of this piece came up a couple of times, I wanted to link it to Nina Simone's quote from her autobiography, which says, critics started to talk about what sort of music I was playing. It was written in 1991 in her autobiography, I Put a Spell on You, and she says, and tried to find a neat slot to file it away in. It was difficult for them because I was playing popular songs in a classical style with a classical piano technique influenced by cocktail jazz. On top of that, I included spirituals and children's song in my performances, and those sorts of songs were automatically identified with the folk movement. So saying what sort of music I played gave the critics problems because there was something from everything in there. But it also meant I was appreciated across the board by jazz, folk, pop, blues fans, as well as admirers of classical music. And I think it just, when I look at this piece and how we're discussing it, and also looking at this quote, there's a connection in that of, the depth of playfulness and all of that. So I love this pairing for those reasons. And there's the up close of the square in the middle.
It's interesting, because Carol says, I love anything with indigo, especially when paired with orange. And right now I'm in Mexico and there's all these blue houses that have that orange border. So I'm loving that comment, just as I'm loving this piece, there really is that. Yeah. And then there's a shout out to Lucreza, who Carol says that she's got the indigo and oranges going on.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Oh, how funny.
Listen, Lucreza always has amazing colors going on. So if you can adjust your settings so you can see her background, I hope it's okay, Lucreza. I'm telling folks this.
That's fine today.
All right.
Oh, I thought you were going to continue to say that what we see in the background is Lucreza's art. She's an artist.
Oh my God! No, we did not say that we were going to say that, Dimitri.
I'm sorry. But now the cat is out the bag.
Yes. All right, the next piece. Set my timer. I keep forgetting. So, Don't Smoke in Bed is a jazz song originally composed and recorded by Willard Robinson and later associated, of course, with Nina Simone, because it's Nina Simone singing it in 1958 in her 1958 album, Little Girl Blue. I don't think I can say any more about this song and the pairing. I will go straight to the art.
So I think, Charlie, you're with me on this one, right? So this is one of our favorite artists, Njideka Akunyili Crosby, who is just phenomenal. We currently have one of her pieces at MOAD, actually, and we've had her in several exhibitions. She also is in the collection at SF MoMA. So for folks who are not in the San Francisco area, here's a reason to come and to see some of this. This is a self-portrait of Njideka, which she doesn't do so often by herself, but it's her in the center. Oftentimes she is with her husband, and someone asked the question, if you look on the table, which we're zooming to, on the cup and the platter is her and her husband. And in Nigeria, and actually lots of parts of West Africa, actually, you create this commemorative cloth for something important, a wedding, when a president gets elected. I want to get a hold of the Barack Obama commemorative cloth. If anyone has it, I know it's probably worth a ton right now, but it's her brother that we're seeing in the background and his wife during their wedding. And Njideka's husband, they met in art school. As you can see, he is a white American man. And so oftentimes her work is exploring this relationship of her being a Nigerian woman who moves to the United States and is both African and American and has, this this blended relationship with her husband and his culture. And sometimes, she's representing when he goes to Nigeria and he feels like the outsider, within the culture, and just kind of them coming together. She lives and works in Los Angeles now. She's a graduate of the Yale MFA program, which all the artists who come out of that program end up being super duper famous and amazing. And so, yeah, she's just really talking about this hybridity, the downcast, silent eyes that she has, which it looks like we're zooming back to it, could be interpreted as a sadness. But I happen to have a lot of Nigerian family members, and it's also just this regalness, that particularly Nigerian women have. It's almost like she's looking down at us, and we are, she is the queen with her amazing head wrap on in green. And Charlie, I don't know if you want to add anything to it. So I want to hear what people in the chat, like, what do you think about her expression? But again, it's also her being by herself, which usually she's with her husband. She's got him down on the table in the commemorative cloth, but he's not present.
Yeah, I don't know that I would add much. We, as you say, we both really, really love this artist. She's really one of my favorite contemporary artists. And, one thing that you'll notice in her technique, which is so interesting, is that she includes photos in her backgrounds. And even when you don't think you see one, if you go up close to some of her work, some of the textural work that you see are actually photos. And, she's sort of riffing off of Igbo memory cloth, where you'll often see photos or images on the clothing that people are wearing. And we had another piece of hers before the pandemic that was just stunning. There was no other word for it. It was just stunning. So it's great stuff. If you ever get a chance to see her work, it doesn't matter where you are. It's really worth a close look because she's quite a craftsman as well as a just wonderful artist.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I see we had the question in chat about the necklace in Sade. You've answered that. It's the initial that she takes from her husband, I guess.
It's the heart N and heart and J.
Oh, cute.
So it's a necklace. Yeah.
I ran across another Crosby painting just a couple days ago at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. There's a wonderful Black American portraits exhibition going on there. In her, one of her works was included.
Yeah, I think also just, she uses a variety of techniques, and Charlie started talking about that, but, she does painting, she often does photo transfer, as well as collaging, elements of printmaking. Even the one that we have at Moad right now is just, I have to stare at it because it's a work on paper where it's like you can see there's acrylic, but it starts to fade into the printmaking, and she's just masterful at so many different techniques.
Yes. All right. Well, we just from figurative back to this piece. While we're looking at this, guess who it is before we match it? Guess whose piece it is? Because I couldn't believe it. If you want to guess, you have 2 seconds because I got to jump to the music. All right, no one is guessing in the chat. All right, let's see. So this pairing, by the way, beautiful album cover. If you have a chance to look at the album cover for Father on My Wings or Father in My Wings, I think it's On My Wings. It's an album that just shows her. I mean, often we see Nina Simone in her regal face. So this happens to be so beautiful, and this is part of the Father on My Wings album, and this is after her time in Switzerland. So there are some parts where I think, you know, especially if you speak French or French and understand some of the things in that album, you would understand what and the time that she spent there were not very, very good. She didn't feel very welcome in Switzerland. So she talks about that in her album, and also, you know, kind of playfully, you know, celebrates color as being a beautiful thing. And this is an album in kind of in later of her works in 1978. I think this is before Baltimore, the album Baltimore. So toward the end of her musical career. So yeah, color is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I love that the guest we had was that this was one of your paintings, Lucretia.
Oh, how funny.
You're in pretty good company with Alma Thomas, right?
Right? Oh my goodness. I feel honored. Yes, this is Alma Thomas. I have to say, I, like Sade, was very surprised when I realized that this was Alma Thomas, because I'm used to her other artwork, which right now the name of it escapes me, but it's the one that was hanging in the White House when Obama was president. And it just seems like such a departure from what I'm accustomed to seeing from her. But the one constant in all of her work is her love of nature and her fascination with the colors of nature. And so it was from this perspective that I came to kind of understand a little bit more about this painting. I know that initially when we looked at it, we thought perhaps it was figures that were facing outward, but in actuality, this is actually just her painting the colors of leaves and flowers in autumn. And so, you know, she paints with the vivid reds and the greens and the oranges, and there's, you know, the hints of brown and beige as they kind of give themselves over to the changing of the seasons from autumn to winter. And so it's just, you know, it's just that she has such a love and such a fascination with colors and with florals, because most of the paintings that she paints comes from just observing nature from her own backyard, her own garden. And so she was inspired by looking outside her window, which was just overflowing with flowers at the time. And so she painted this, and she painted the images with, you know, the suggestion of light that kind of flickers through the leaves and the petals. And she would use, you know, dabs of paints and strokes of paints to kind of express the new colors through her window panes that would appear every time the plants and the flowers would move in the wind. And, you know, I'm sure that we've all experienced that when we're looking at, you know, flowers or something, and the wind comes along and kind of moves them, and you see kind of a different perspective or different color. And so that's what she was actually portraying in this piece. And so she actually studied a lot of color theory from the artist Johannes Itten, I believe that's how you pronounce it, so that she was able to come to this style of painting. And so his theory was actually one of the first identifiable strategies for color combinations. And so he actually devised 7 methodologies for coordinating colors using hues contrasting properties. And so it just, you know, it's a wonderful piece once you kind of realize that it's such a departure, number one, from her normal kind of painting, and then just understanding about her love of nature. And so, you know, a few of the things that she said about this is that Through her impressions of nature, she hoped to impart beauty, joy, love, and peace, and that through color, she sought to concentrate on beauty and happiness rather than on man's inhumanity to man. She endeavored to infuse her work with meaning beyond racial gender constraints, and in doing so, she wanted to challenge the singularity of race. So, yeah.
Oh.
And I did find, and I'm putting it in the chat, the painting at the White House that you were referring to is called Resurrection, I believe. And yeah, very, it's a very interesting contrast. That this would be the same artist. For me, now, Lucretia, does this where do you go with this abstraction? Do you see figures in this, or do you see really just colors? What is it? Where is it taking you?
Well, for me, I did see figures. It appeared to me that, it was a couple of people with their backs towards us. But then the more I read about her love for nature, the more I began to really see. And then I kind of really got into the colors, because I do personally enjoy these types of vivid colors. And so, yeah, I just kind of found myself mesmerized just by looking at the colors and the color combinations that she had. So yeah, it's marvelous.
Ooh, okay, well, we have 3 pieces hanging there. 4 pieces, and they're all really great. But if you have to leave, I know it's approaching the 3 o'clock. But let's look at this for a moment. All right, here's the musical. Yeah. So The Other Woman is a song written by Jessie Mae Robinson, and which was originally recorded by Sarah Vaughan. But man, right? So that song, the entirety of that song is just so powerful, and I thought it was fitting to go with this piece. Yeah, what do you think?
I think I'm with Lucretia on this one, right?
Yes.
So I'm gonna let you kick it off if you don't mind, if you'd like to.
I don't mind at all.
So
well, I first have to say, okay, when I saw this piece, before I actually heard the song that Sade had paired it with and read up on it, I had a totally different narrative going. In my mind, this was a Black woman who was, on a Saturday night doing her hair up, getting ready for church tomorrow. She had already, got her kids ready. And so now she's up at midnight trying to get herself together. And then I read what it's really about. Okay? And I thought, wow, okay, such a totally different thing. So this piece is by Dox Thrash. I believe is how you pronounce the last name, Thrash. And he was kind of known for painting things that were common clashes and challenges that were faced by African Americans through his portraiture. And so in this particular piece, he is showing a female, he says a hairdresser, I believe, readying herself for a night on the town. And what was so engaging about this is that though it is, a black and white piece, you can tell that this is a person of color by the facial features and how he kind of uses the shading to kind of bring forth that she's a Black woman, and that what she's doing is important. And so, she's straightening her naturally kinky hair with a hot iron, which in this day and age, it's not so often you see that, but at the time, that was a big issue for a Black woman who has her kinky hair to get up and to use a hot comb, as it was called, to straighten her hair. Now, in this case, it's one that is electrical, as Dimitri brought up in one of our conversations. It looks like it's plugged in, but during that time, people would actually use the straightening comb, where they would take an iron comb and put it on on the fire, get it blazing hot, and then bring it through your hair. So this was a serious kind of thing that you're undertaking. So she's straightening up her hair, and what he's saying with that is that she's conforming to physical standards that were pushed upon her by the dominant white culture, where straight hair is a marker of beauty, which we understand that, because if you're going to go through all of this to straighten your hair, yeah, this is a serious thing. You have seriously been taken over by society's marker of beauty. And so he goes on to say that though she's muscular and shapely and attractive, she actually still feels the need to engage in this laborious task of making her tightly wound hair straight in order to prepare for the night out in the public. And so you can see the weariness on her face, the weariness of going through this whole process of, you can see the shadowing in her eyes, and you can see, that she's just weary from having to do this. But this is a thing that she's.
We lost Lucretia.
I'm like, I think she'll come back, right?
I was not ready for her to go. I was having such a good time listening to her. Oh man, yeah.
I would think I would just add to Lucretia. Hopefully, you're coming right back in a second. But there's this vacant chair in front of her that would suggest that she is a hairdresser and probably is now has already done someone else's hair and now is turning to her own self. And just a little bit about Doc Thrash. I had never heard about him before, but he was an African-American artist who was skilled, as Lucretia said, as a draftsman, but also as a master printmaker, and a painter. And one of the things that I just found out is that also okay, Joyce, I'm just saying what actually Doc said about his work is that was what he was imagining, but it could be holding the mirror. But the artist says in a quote that the chair could suggest that someone else was there, which is why she's doing her hair after midnight. If you look at the clock in the back, it's like 12:10 at night before she can finally go out after doing all her work. But he was the co-inventor of the called carborundum, I can't say it correctly, a printmaking process. And so it's a brand new printmaking process that was started in the 1930s that he developed, which is really cool. So, and he wanted to make art that really celebrated African-American life in all of its forms. And so he was really an activist through his work and was a printmaker with the WPA Fine Print Workshop in Philadelphia, where he spent most of his life. So just really interesting on so many different levels.
Wow. I had no idea. I would love to learn the name of the print making, Dimitri.
I'll put it in the chat, because maybe someone knows how to say it. Carborundum.
But like the process, I'm curious about the making process. Yeah.
Let me see. I think I've got a little note on like what it is. Yeah.
Man, I hope Lucretia finds us in the internet world and joins us again.
Right. Yeah, I really liked what she was saying, and talking.
Yeah, me too.
Her experience as a Black woman, the idea that this is a very wearying situation. Yeah,
I mean, I never had to do that with my hair, but I had lots of relatives that. I mean, this is back. He was working. he was working in the 1940s, but in the 80s and the 90s, I have family members that would do it, and you would just walk into the house. I don't know why they were still using.
I used to do it in the 2000s, Dimitri.
Right, the traditional hot comb that you put on the stove to heat up, or if you're fancy, you've got the little warmer, and you would just walk in, and the house is full of smoke, and you can. There's a distinctive smell of, because you have to put the oil in the hair, grease, like the blue grease or the green grease. If you know what I'm talking about, that you get at the drugstore. And yeah, the smell.
Listen, Lucrecia is not here, so you can't just have me here. You telling all my
you can represent. You can represent. You can represent
all of our
it.
hair secrets to Dimitri, but
oh my gosh, Sarah would use an iron and an ironing board. Wow.
Okay. Whoa. Okay.
That's hardcore.
All right. So let's look at this piece. And so this song, I wish I could play the whole thing for you right now, and we will send you the links to all the songs, so you can go to YouTube and listen to them. But more than any other songs that we have shared today, this one would be one I would ask you to listen to the lyrics of Little Brown Baby. It was originally written by Oscar Brown Jr., and it was included in Nina Simone's 5th album. And it's a powerful song. And I think we'll just talk about the art, but I think to go back and listen to the lyrics about how a parent raises a child and what they wish for their child, and the energy is really captured in the song. Yeah. Dimitri and Charlie, I think this is your piece.
This is me again. I'll let you kick it off, Charlie.
Well, Dimitri, both you and I are both fathers, and I think we saw this and completely had a very tender moment when looking at this particular piece. In fact, we were lobbying for a Father's Day special in June when we could look at it. But technique. I mean, this is again masterful technique. I really like the way he shows the subtle differences, and this is so hard to do with this medium, is that you can see the subtle differences of the hand. This is a great close-up right here, is the hand with the let's call it a blanket, or the baby's head and the background, and the way he does this wash in the background. The technique is really, really masterful. And he was another really interesting artist who grew up in Boston, and he was able to get scholarship money to study at the MFA, the Massachusetts, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And what's really interesting is that he was part of a biracial couple. They used to have to travel in separate cars when they toured around the world. And one of the things that his wife had said is that his main objective as an artist was to deliver a message to people about Black dignity. So we have that sort of catchword again, racial justice, people trying to get a better deal in life. And I think you can really get a sense of what she's talking about when you see this particular work. I mean, this work has such warmth. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that he was very influenced by again, here I am in Mexico, the Mexican muralist Orozco. You know, I think a lot of us know Diego Rivera's work, but Orozco was another one of the giant artists from the mural period. And when you look at this, you know, this could be like one of the little portions in a Orozco mural. And I think it's a really, it's again, it speaks to me. It's a really tender piece that I have a personal connection to.
Mm.
Yeah, I think also, you know, just to add, thank you, Charlie, for that. I would also say my favorite Mexican muralist, he was also influenced by David Alfaro Siqueiros as well, who I absolutely love, crazy about. And yeah, he just really made, John Woodrow Wilson made, you know, his entire career was depicting Black men and their children, because he said that, you know, mothers and their child was this theme that was seen so much, but he really wanted to show and relay the relationship that particularly Black fathers have. And this is, you know, this topic that we see over and over again. Even Barack Obama fell into the, you know, to the myth that Black men are not present with their families, and he did the whole like be a father to your child campaign. And then, you know, researchers found out that actually Black men are the most engaged with their children of any other fathers in America. So I'm just gonna pick up on that one, you know, to dispel the myth. And so even back, you know, in the 30s and the 40s, this artist was really fighting against that. And, you know, ends up, like Charlie says, going to Mexico, again, for freedom of expression, to where they could go, like Elizabeth Catlett and Charles White, who we started off with, could go there. They could explore not only learning a different art form outside of the European standard by studying under Mexican artists, but also that where they could find dignity in being in Mexico. And that was really what his work was about his whole entire life. And then he becomes really active, you know, later on in the 60s when he returns to Boston and the civil rights movement. And so all of his images were about disparity. He starts to go later on into thinking about income disparities and, again, just showing the domestic life for African Americans. Another artist I had never heard of and, you know, really want to learn a lot more about after Sade introduced me to him.
Now, just look at the technique of the cheeks, how you see the light on this baby's cheeks. It's really beautiful how he does that. And then he contrasts that, you know, he has like a bit of chiaroscuro with the white of the, I guess it's the blanket or maybe the shirt that the baby's wearing. And, you know, just, it's really great technique.
Yeah. And, you know, when I first looked at it, I thought it was a little cowlick type of thing. And then it's a shirt, it's the father's shirt. And that was really cute.
I thought it was the Eiffel Tower, but I guess you're right.
Charlie. All right. Well, second to last piece for today. So, To Be Young, Gifted and Black was a song written in memory of Nina's good friend, Lorraine Hansberry, the writer, the playwright, just all around genius. I even have a book with that same title. And the title of the song coming from a play Hansberry had been working on just prior to her death. And this is such an innocent and beautiful look on a child, hopeful look. And I would like to invite folks to look at the title of this piece as well, as Rodney leads us in conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, we just had Gordon Parks photograph on one of our recent Art as We See It programs, which was the mother and daughter in front of a department store. Just a stunning photograph. So this is another one of his. And, the young boy whose ambition is to become a soldier, it's no accident. This is from 1943. But I don't know, but looking at this person, this young man, I'm kind of just thinking like, well, he just looks so comfortable in his skin, and it makes me wonder, what did happen with him? Did he end up becoming a soldier? Also, I love the hat. This is, we had so many images in recent shows where we had hats, and then it's just like, he just looks great. Even though I don't think we would see a boy wearing a hat like this today, it kind of looks really good on him. And then I also think of the comment Charlie made about the last image and the light on the cheeks of the baby. And here we just have wonderful tones of the light on his face, the contrast to the house behind him. It's just a wonderfully composed photograph. And even though it's black and white, even though it's from 80 years ago, it just strikes me as a very modern image. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, I'm looking at, it's 1943 when Park got his assignment from Office of War Information to travel to Daytona Beach to photograph the Mary McLeod Bethune and her surroundings. And just to think, this is in Library of Congress. I urge everyone to just go and look at all the photos. And the pictures he took were to capture her surroundings and the time of that time in history. And in the context of all of it, I think when you look at all of the photos that he has taken and that are available, you start to form a narrative. But singularly with this photo, I start to see what Rodney is saying also is kind of, just as a photograph with the lighting of the hat, and as a singularly, I think it's important to also look at the fabric. We can almost touch the texture of the fabric, how beautiful it is with the lighting and the shadows on this one. I could also see like his legs. I'm just like, that's what my legs look like when I need lotion. Like, it's just such a beautiful photo. Yeah.
We have some good comments in chat.
Yeah.
Wishing to be a soldier is amazing, but each child needs to have a goal to work toward in life. So wondering if maybe, Jim Crow and restrictions in the world were what limited his ambition. And how so many of our young, gifted, and Black boys, men have gone off to war for this country. Yeah, over the years.
Dimitri, I'm sorry. But yeah, so I also want to say, speaking of young, gifted, and Black, to kind of tie it back to Nina Simone. Nina Simone's community had seen her talent, and in the beginning I mentioned that she could play a song on the piano by ear at the age of 3. And her community had seen that, and although her parents were not wealthy, her neighbors, her church community had gathered money to send her off to school. And it's kind of sad, and it that kind of thing in a young person's life you would not forget. And although her hope as a career as a pioneering African-American classical pianist was dashed after the school denied her admission. So at the end, she herself would claim that racism was the reason that she did not attend. And this is just to think about dreaming. You dream, even being in a small town in North Carolina, dreaming about making it in different things, and knowing that there are these limitations. I can't even imagine, to be honest. So, thinking about young, gifted, and Black, and recognizing also as she sings this, also connecting to that story of herself as being young, gifted, and Black, and needing that encouragement. So, and the last piece for today, I can't believe everyone is staying with us, and we are past our time. Thank you for being patient with us, but this is the last piece we'll look at today.
All in the air. I can't stand the pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer. Alabama has got me so upset, and Memphis has made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi Goddamn.
So, by the mid 1960s, Nina Simone became known as the voice of civil rights movement, and she wrote Mississippi Goddamn. This is in response to the 1963 assassination of Medgar Evers, and the Birmingham church bombing that killed 4 young African-American girls. She also penned 4 women, chronicling the complex history of the 4 women, the 4 African-American women. And in all of it, just to, there is so much exasperation, and there's so much energy in this one. And she writes in her autobiography, nightclubs were dirty, making records were dirty, popular music was dirty, and to mix all of that with politics seemed senseless and demeaning. And until songs like Mississippi Goddamn just burst out of me, I had musical problems as well. How can you take the memory of a man like Medgar Evers and reduce all that? He was 3.5 minutes and a simple tune. That was the musical side of it I shied away from. I didn't like protest music because a lot of it was simple and unimaginative. It stripped the dignity away from the people it was trying to celebrate. But the Alabama church bombing and the murder of Medgar Evers stopped the argument. And with Mississippi Goddamn, I realized there was no turning back. And that is from her autobiography. So yeah, let's talk about the art piece.
Well, Lucas, you want to go ahead?
Oh, okay. Well, this piece really kind of puzzled me until I read Herbert Singleton's story, and then it just became so clear what he was really saying with his art. So, first and foremost, he would make carvings on anything that he could find, basically. He would, driftwood, cabinets, old doors, planks of wood. When the river was low where he lived, he would pull things up to carve on. He was born in New Orleans, in Algiers, in the neighborhood of Algiers, and so his art actually drew really heavily on the life of a corrosive inner city neighborhood, and he most often addressed both the themes of racial injustice and the rich African American cultural traditions of his region. His own personal life was similar with other folk artists, it was a life that was filled with mistakes, missteps, violence, run-ins with the law, and addictions. He was the eldest of 8 children, and one of his most traumatic memories was when his father left the house to go to pick up some cigarettes, and he never came back. And so he ended up attending school until the 7th grade, and then he ended up working a lot of time in a steel factory as a bridge painter. And then he was arrested as a young adult for narcotic crimes, and he spent 13 years in the Louisiana State Penitentiary between 1967 and 1986. And it was after his release from prison that he began to make these little clay sculptures. But, clay being what clay is, would soon disintegrate, was easily broken. And so he switched his medium to working in wood. And so he started out carving axe handles into walking sticks, which were actually primarily used as weapons. And so his customers tended to be pimps and drug dealers and horse and carriage drivers in the French quarters. And in one case, one of the carriage drivers notoriously killed a robber during a mugging. And so, poor Herbert Singleton's sticks became known as killer sticks. And so, it was just this kind of life that brought forth the art that he has. He witnessed his sister and 2 friends being murdered by 3 white police officers who were searching for another African-American person who had shot another white officer. And so then he was taken in for questioning during that time, and they suffocated him for 12 hours. And nothing ever became of this traumatic experience that he went through. And so it was from all of this that he would carve. And so when you look at this, you kind of see, life being brought forth. You see a person that has a whip in his hand. You see 2 figures that are in blue, which I'm assuming are figures from his life in prison. On the left-hand side, you see what appears to be shackles. Later on in life, he began to depict a lot of biblical scenes. And so, you see what appears to be maybe someone ministering. Then you see the one that's next to the figure in white, which is really kind of puzzling for me. But it appears to be someone maybe who's having the life choked out of them by religion. There's just a lot that is going on. You see up in the right-hand corner, you see a gentleman that presumably is one of the pimps that he used to deal with. So really and truly, his art reflected the life that he led. And I'm overwhelmed by the emotion that is in this piece. I think in the centerpiece, you see people who are just doing hard labor, carrying what appears to be large bags of something. So his work was just really and truly about what he lived. Just a remarkable work.
So Lucretia, it's like you see this as a personal history, I guess, right? Like this might be things that he went through. Mm-hmm. The way we was is really the way, it's like the way I was. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is like at a point where he is, I know he had that turning point in his life where he started doing more biblical scenes, and this is like kind of reflecting on that past.
Yes.
It's a very, to me, it's a very startling piece. It's like things that many of us look away from. It's like a way to confront the difficult life that someone like he led.
Yes.
Oof.
And he ended up passing away at the age of 62 of lung cancer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to thank Dimitri, Charlie, Lucretia, and Ronnie for such wonderful program. Thank you so much for those of you who support us, who stay with us, who let us know your thoughts in the chat. Of course, this would not be a program without you, so we really appreciate your thoughts and ideas in the chat. If you are in the Bay Area, come see us. We are open right now with 5 exhibitions. Well, yeah, five exhibitions? Yes. And you can text to donate. Any amount is welcome and appreciated, and allow us to do these types of free programs and become a member at Museum of the African Diaspora and enjoy all the perks. Thank you so much, and I will see you all on the other link. But have a great day, everyone, and thanks for staying with us, even though we went over about. Oh my goodness. Okay, we gotta go. Bye, everyone.
Bye.